Welcome to Provoking Peace, a podcast by the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, where we bring Muslim and Jewish women and our allies into conversation to explore what it really takes to build peace in ourselves, our communities, and our world.
We go beyond the headlines to speak with people who are living this work every day: activists, educators, artists, faith leaders, and more.
We're here to ask bold questions, listen deeply, and invite you to join us in disrupting assumptions and stereotypes, one Muslim and
one Jewish woman at a time.
Okay, so it is our great honor and pleasure today to welcome Nancy and Samah into our podcast. Ellie and I are here in this wonderful company, and we look forward to this great conversation that is in front of us. And we would like to introduce our guests today with a few more words, although you will learn more about them as we go. But today we have Rabbi Nancy Kreimer with us. Rabbi Nancy Kreimer is a prominent leader in interfaith dialogue and multi-faith education. She is the founder of the Department of Multi-Faith Studies and Initiatives at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia, where she served for over 30 years before retiring. She co-authored the books Strangers, Neighbors, Friends, Muslim, Christian, Jewish Reflections on Compassion and Peace, which explores how religion can serve as a solution to global challenges by fostering compassion and mutual understanding. Rabbi Kreimer is also deeply committed to social justice, often integrating her work with a broader vision of shared humanity and mutual respect.
In addition to Rabbi Kreimer, we have Samah El-Haj Ibrahim, who is an adjunct professor at Moore College of Art and Design, and she specializes in political theory, citizenship, gender, statehood, statelessness, and colonization, with regional expertise in the Middle East. She is currently working on a book project that examines how citizenship is performed in unrecognized states and how non-recognition diminishes the effectiveness of citizenship and hinders citizens' ability to assert their rights and participate in citizenship practices. She currently teaches a class on the power of appearances, which explores how constructed standards of appearance have been deployed for various socio-political ends. Samah, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I've been in the United States for 23 years. I'm a Palestinian refugee from Lebanon. That means that I was born in Lebanon, but I had no citizenship because my family came from Palestine. They came from Haifa and Akka, and they became refugees in 48. And then I inherited the refugee status. So the first citizenship, I actually became citizen later on in my life when after I came, the first citizenship is being an American citizen. And I think that's kind of got me into politics by itself because of that. I wanted to know, and citizenship, because I wanted to know, what is it that I missed? What is it that my family still till now don't have that we've been deprived of? So it's kind of personal. My work is kind of a little bit personal in a sense. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sama. Rabbi Nancy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as we start?
So, oh gosh, I grew up a long time ago in the 1950s in the suburbs of New York, and we are I'm part of the post-Holocaust generation, the spoiled brats of Jewish history. We were after the Holocaust. We were in America. We grew up with privilege. We grew up without the legacy of victimization that was 3,000 years of history. And I grew up hearing all about this wonderful country, Israel. And when I was a teenager in 1967, my family actually went to Israel to see the wonderful new part of Israel that they had captured in the 67 war. And everybody was very excited and enthusiastic. We got to see the wall, which nobody had seen since 48. I mean, I had never seen it, but even then, we met people who were like, "This is not good." I mean, my parents were sophisticated and academics and intellectuals, and they were hanging out with folks in Israel who were saying, you know, people do not like to be occupied. This is not going to end well. And there were people even in 68 and 69, just the very glimmers of people, including my own grandfather, who was a refugee from Germany originally, Austria, were saying, why don't you just give back that land? Nobody was talking about giving back what was conquered in 48, but for sure the 67 land, well, we all know how that ended. It just, we ended up with all the horrible and the settlers and the movement and the turn to the right. And, so ever since then, ever since I was a teenager, I've been on I would guess you would call the left edge of Judaism in that regard, and watching my own Jewish community becoming right wing and Israel right or wrong, and, all of that has been alienating. That's about it. Fortunately, I'm a part of the Reconstructionist movement where we have a legacy of opposing the idea of Jewish supremacy. Theologically, we take a stand against Jewish chosenness, which we argue increasingly these days turns out in terms of a state to be ethno-nationalism, Jewish supremacy, and a state that is basically apartheid and racist. So I am part of a movement that actually acknowledges that, but I will be honest, most Jewish communities would have no idea what I'm talking about. They would say, wait, what are you talking about Israel? Like, really? So that's me, and I care very much about the Jewish people, and I care very much about justice.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Nancy.
Your introduction was really led perfectly into our question of how do you keep your cultural identity close as part of the Palestinian diaspora?
Mm,
It's a good question. Well, I do have family still who are refugees. Actually, my brothers are still refugees, stateless, no citizenship.
Mhm.
My nephews are stateless, no citizenship.
Do they live in the US or
They
where?
live in Lebanon.
Okay.
They're born in Lebanon. All of my extended family is uncles, cousins, aunts, everybody who've kind of raised me and I know very well are in Lebanon as Palestinian refugees.
Mhm.
And what does that mean to be a Palestinian refugee? Well, first, to be a refugee is that there is no country that claims you in a way that gives you rights. With claiming membership, you get rights and responsibilities, and there is no country that is like, so you grow up feeling unwanted. You grow up feeling not belonging, even that this is where you grew up or this is your childhood, but it's like you have no political rights to vote, so you can't change anything. You feel helpless so what's the point of being part of something? So that is, you can't change, you can't participate in. So political rights, no political rights. Also, we do not have civil rights, like rights ownership. We, as Palestinians, have no right to own a property. What does that mean is that you can live in a house, you can rent it, but as a Palestinian, you cannot own a property in Lebanon. You cannot join anything that has like license, meaning you cannot be a cab driver. So jobs also, there are 74 jobs in Lebanon we cannot just go into, like lawyers, anything that needs license. So it's closed for us. And traveling. So traveling is really hard for us because every country requires, some countries actually don't know I've been, before I became an American citizen, so we have something called travel document. So it's not really a passport. And in a lot of countries don't recognize that and don't know, like, what is that? So there's a lot of problem with visas and trying to get out. So I've lived that. That's part of my upbringing. I've seen a lot of, the problem of being a Palestinian refugee is it's a lived experience. And my brothers and now my nephews who are like, I have nephews who are in their 20s, are in college, and the same problem for them, which is like, okay, well, I got a degree. What am I going to do with it since unemployed? We have a lot of restrictions being in Lebanon. So that is part of like me in a way of the struggle that my people are going through as Palestinian refugees, but also we've grew up, yearning for our to be in our land, our ancestors' land. So in a way, Palestine has always lived in us rather than us living in Palestine. So the diaspora always said that we have a country that lives in us. And so that's kind of part of, and I have my family here, part of like my mother is here. And culturally, my having a mother here is like, the food, the speaking, Arabic. So it's all of that kind of helps to keep my culture close.
Yeah. I mean, it must be really difficult emotionally to sort of have, your citizenship in the US and have your mother with you, but knowing that, your family, much of your family still is in that refugee status. That must sort of have a lot of mixed emotions for you.
Yes. I mean, for my mother who she got her citizenship at age like in her late 60s. I mean, I remember that day when I was with her, she was crying, she was in tears and saying, "This is the first time I feel like I matter." So citizenship, while it's not perfect, right? There are a lot of problems. Not every citizen have full all of the rights. We're working towards it, right? Being a member is kind of important. And she felt that, of like if something happens to her, there is a country that would care. So living for us, I'll tell you, as I grew up, I remember my uncle from time to time, there would be in newspaper some kind of news about what are they going to do with the Palestinian refugees. So he would bring the newspaper and say, "Oh, they're saying that they're gonna, take us to Canada or to," and there's that part of me. I'm like, are we just like a bunch of like, I don't know, like garbage people are just like trying to figure out what to do with these people who are unwanted. So it's kind of that feeling is really, it really hurts. And that the fact that my part of my family are still kind of feeling that and feeling stuck because it's just like it's like you feel like you're growing up with just like you're feeling it's a temporary place for you, yet it's not. It's your whole life. My father, like who passed away in 2012 in the United States here, he had a green card. He passed away, never made it to citizenship, but lived his whole life in Lebanon like this as a refugee. And a lot of my uncles and aunts, their whole life, they came in 48 and, some of them died in Lebanon as refugee. And that's kind of unfair.
And it lives in you. It's part of your identity too.
Can I just add something to answer Allison's question? Because she also asked, like, how do you stay close to your culture and your the way Palestine lives in you? And I want to say that when I was in your home, it really struck me. Definitely the food, definitely language, but also the artwork on your walls. Like, there was this gorgeous piece of art on your wall that was a map of Palestine. I just
Yes,
had
my
to
I have to say I do have two kids, and they're young kids, 8 and 3.5, and it is kind of I mean, I've always had kind of Palestinian art, and it's also for me, it's important to pass that into my kids and for them to live in that kind of environment where it is like my kids know very well that they're Palestinian too, from the father and from the mother. Probably they don't know yet what does that mean. I mean, it's changes even for me. What does it mean to be Palestinian? Changes and it develops but it is important, as you said, Nancy. For me, it's part of that kind of also is that to pass it on like my parents did to me, I'm doing with my kids.
Thank you so much
By the
for
way, if you ever wanna answer any of my questions, go right ahead.
that.
I just want to repeat something that is so powerful you said, Sama. Our land has lived in the hearts of Palestinians rather than us living in the country of Palestine. I think that's such a powerful and beautiful statement, and I just wanted to lift that up. That is beautiful. I want to ask you, Rabbi Nancy. We wanted to hear from you a little bit about how, if your understanding of your Jewish identity in the US changed over time, and if so, how and why. So if you can tell us a little bit where I know we as Sama was saying, what does it mean to be Palestinian? It changes. If you can tell us a little bit about, you as a young person to where you are at now with everything you've accomplished and you do in your
Well,
life.
I think I might have hinted at that when I first started my biography. I kind of stuck that into the question, which is that when I was growing up, anti-Semitism was a non-issue. I heard about it all the time because it was something that happened over in Europe, nothing to do with anything in my life. I had no experience of anti-Semitism. I lived in New York. There's no problem. And I did not take it seriously. And honestly, most Jews, even if they did live in small towns and had a little bit of that, by the time it was post-Holocaust, we were in an era where it was kind of not okay to be anti-Semitic, at least not out there. And we didn't live yet in the time of Donald Trump where your worst instincts are allowed to be stated. I'm not saying there wasn't cultural anti-Semitism inside of people, but they kept it under wraps. And it didn't affect me. We all went to, Ivy League schools and we did everything we wanted to do and everything. So what's changed is that I'm now aware of anti-Semitism as an issue, very aware of the rise of white Christian nationalism, which is now infiltrating people in power in our government, which is scary because they have the guns and we don't. But yeah, it's a very, very different thing. And I'm aware of what they call anti-Semitism on the left, which in my opinion is often not anti-Semitism so much as anti-Zionism, which people get very confused about. So in America now, this is a big issue in my life right now, is that many organizations, including, I think, the Department of Education in the United States, have decided to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism, which includes saying bad things about Israel. So anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. Obviously, I don't agree with that. I know lots of Jews who are anti-Zionist, so it's not a question of my agreeing with that definition, but it is a definition that has been uh, frighteningly adopted by many, many people. And I've seen this year horrible, how can I say, it's been a huge turn
Push.
for
Yeah.
me in my
Mhm.
life to be aware of how many Jews want to talk about anti-Semitism all the time. And my dad recently died and he lived in the Bay Area. Talk about privilege. And, there was a very, very lovely part of Palo Alto. They never talked about anti-Semitism. He was a tenured professor at Stanford. It's all good. But now I get his mail because he died and we had to change his address to my address. Every single week, I get the J, which is a newspaper for Jews who live in Northern California. We have those all over. We have them in the Philly, whatever city, every week, I would say 50% of the articles are about anti-Semitism, and it's about left-wing anti-Semitism and some right-wing anti-Semitism, but they don't have so many of the white nationalists in the Bay Area. What they've got is people in the Bay and Berkeley public schools, for example, and it's all coded as anti-Semitism. And it's anti-Semitism in the school, anti-Semitism at the summer camp. It's just article after article. I keep it in the bathroom, so I can't take time during the day to read it. But if I'm in the bathroom, I pick it up and I read it. And it is scary because Jews in this country in the last year, and I would say since October 7th, have had a kind of PTSD sort of reaction to what happened on October 7th. And it's led to this huge, well, there may be some, I mean, let's face it, there is anti-Zionism on the left. There's no question about it. But one of my problems or missions in life is to try to get people to get a hold of the fact that the white Christian nationalists are more of a threat by far to the safety and well-being of Jews.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Nancy. I think that's why we in the sisterhood and in general insist on saying Jewish communities and Muslim communities, because there is no one monolith way of thinking and acting. And you just described that, Nancy, very well. And I think that's very important to keep in mind.
And you might want to say also that you don't try to use that anti-Semitism and
Exactly. That was my next thought as
maybe
well.
you should explain that because it's obvious to me, but maybe it's not so obvious to everyone listening that those of us in this work don't even like those words.
Exactly. So the sisterhood, a couple of years ago, we made a decision to sort of stay away from that terminology, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So both, we are staying away from both terms and using anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish bigotry. And for a number of reasons, some of them are very political because both of these terms have been politicized, and to avoid that part, as well as to bring attention to each human being, as a member of this society, as a member of our communities, that it is about that one Jewish, one Muslim person, not about these huge concepts that we are trying to debate on a larger scale. But if harm is done to that human being with a particular faith background.
And just to say the obvious, anti-Semitism is a ridiculous word because
Yes.
Because I'm a Semite too.
Yes. And
Um,
they're very inadequate terms
it-
to describe anything.
yeah,
So
it's not accurate
it's
even.
not
Like,
accurate.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
We wanted to now sort of move into your work together. So I was wondering if either one of you, Samah or Rabbi Nancy, either one, wanted to tell us a little bit about how you met and sort of how you've been working together.
Well, we met at a trying to remember what's the name of the event, but it was an event where we were part of a panel. Both actually Nancy and Tahia were there, Rabbi Nancy and Tahia, and that was the first time I met Rabbi Nancy and Tahia. And I was part of the panel, and the panel was to talk about what's going on, what's been going on with Palestine and Israel. How are we working and trying to, I think, kind of all of the work that's, people have been doing and connecting with communities, the Palestinian, the Muslim community, the Jewish community. And I remember Nancy brought these pictures that she had with her, the pictures of children that had been killed. And it was from Israeli children and Palestinian children. And I really, that kind of, you know, I liked what I heard from Nancy too, of like mourning every child, mourning every human being, regardless of their nationality. And yet, being clear that the numbers on both sides are not the same. So that was like really for me, it was really helpful. It's not like we're trying to, saying there are equal numbers of Israelis being killed with equal numbers of Palestinians. It's actually very different. But yet, you know, these are children and we can mourn both. These are human beings and we can mourn both. We have our views on, what's happening and everything, but as human beings, I kind of created, and I've been doing that since then, of creating a space despite the fact that I am a Palestinian. So it's like, oh, I want to mourn my people, or the fact that there's thousands of Palestinians to mourn, and it's an ongoing every day. Yet finding a space in my heart to also mourn the Israelis, to also mourn the hostages. I can do both. And I can be against what Israel is doing and still do both. So I think that's kind of, we met to answer your question, we met in that event. And since then, kind of Tahia and Nancy texted me and we exchanged numbers, and then they texted me, say, you want to kind of start working together. And it's been really a wonderful, working together, different vigils and getting together. And it was healing to say, like, even just meeting and all of the Jewish community and the Muslim community and a lot of rabbis. And it was really healing to, on a personal level, even other than the work that we're doing, to model, that we can be together, that we're not enemies. That's the message, that we're like, the media wants to always depict us as enemies. And here we are, we're together, we can be together, we can mourn for each other, and we can feel each other suffering. And that was healing to kind of, for me, as what's happening, I was like, that kept me going every day.
Is
Mm.
this the first time that you've worked with someone that's sort of embedded in the Jewish community?
No, it's not the first time, but definitely it's in that time, in the time
Mhm.
of what's happening.
Yeah.
It has been. So I have friends who are actually Israelis and Jewish we've been together, and they've been actually also, we've been grieving together. And these are, like, I call them family friends that I have, that they, you know, do Thanksgiving together. And so, but it's just, in this time was like, it's been tough. And even beginning with these family friends, we had to give each other space, because they have our feeling, weren't sure what was happening, that they had family in Israel that was, they're scared for it. I have family. I've lost some family in Palestine, in Gaza. And, and then until we kind of got together, like, we're both suffering, you know, but I think we're with Nancy, we've been, and as a group, we've kind of created that group where we're working towards, in the midst of all of this. So yes, it's new for me to work in the midst of this, rather than just like, usually I've been doing work with, but it's not during genocide. So yeah.
Rabbi Nancy, you had a very emotional reaction to what Samah said.
Yeah,
Would you
well, it's very emotional for me because, having Samach as part of this has been huge, because the other women in the group are not Palestinian, they're Muslim. We have Muslim women, like Tahia is a co-chair of the group with me at this point, but we're going to hopefully step down soon. But the group is called Sisters Waging Peace. And I say something about this, which is having Samach there has been huge for us, because it's really important. Jews have an organization in Israel called Standing Together, and they, for example, have a Philadelphia chapter, and it's mostly Jews, right? It's Jewish group, and they called and said, "Would you like to sponsor our vigil or whatever they were doing, rally? And we said, yes, of course. And they said, and by the way, do you have a Palestinian speaker who can speak for this group? And we said, yes. And Samach spoke, and it was so powerful. So many people. I hope you felt. Did you feel like people were really, really appreciated your being there?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people came at the end to me and talked and were very, moved. And I think that's what we're trying to do is
Right.
a
We
lot of people
infiltrate.
have not seen a Palestinian probably or heard the Palestinian narrative, and having a space where they feel safe, where they like it's important. It's important for me to be me. I'm not trying to, be anybody else or kind of like it's just this is my story, but also, like having that space again that I'm working on personally to hold both people, both who are suffering, because suffering is suffering. It's not like we're competing who's suffering more. There are facts on the ground for sure, and that we respect that. But it's just standing for both people.
And the thing I wanna say, though, is that it's pushed me too, because, very recently, there was a Palestinian solidarity thing happening in the Northeast with Palestinian prayers for peace that this guy, I think his name is Sam Katab, organized, and it didn't call to me really. It sounded like it would be 80 to 90% Palestinian people, maybe some Quakers, not very many Jews. It was in a Palestinian neighborhood, not a Jewish neighborhood, and I got off my butt and went because I wanted to be there, and it was because of Samach that I was there, because when I got there, I realized there was not many Jews there, and it really was a Palestinian solidarity thing, and honestly, some of the things that were said made me a little uncomfortable because it was just all about Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. There wasn't a word about Jewish anything, and I'm used to a little bit of, Jewish suffering and a little, it was really like the chants were very intense and they were very, very one-sided. But I felt so glad to be there because I was there doing solidarity work, and it was because of you that I felt called to do that. And we came with our Sisters Waging Peace shawls on. There were 3 of us there. Yeah, so it's pushing me also. It's pushing me beyond my comfort level.
Yeah, and I think I want to add that that's where it's like helping. We're trying to help probably others through vigils and things like that, but we're also helping ourselves. We're changing through this
And
because
we have to be willing to be a little vulnerable and take a few risks and not just do what we're used to doing.
yeah, when I close up, like it's hard for me to feel with the let's say the what the Israelis are going through. Then I remember my sisters and I'm like, no, I can't do that, right? So it's that kind of personal touch when I'm like,
And
I'm gonna open up for everybody, for the Israelis.
And
Um,
for me, I can totally feel for both because it's easy for me to feel for both because it's so obvious that the Palestinian suffering is in my face every single day. I open up the newspaper, and the Jewish suffering is there because they're my people. So I don't have a problem with that. But my problem is when I hear things that have been outside my level of political, for example, as much as we've been left-wing progressive Jews, we've never taken the position that our government, the United States, shouldn't help Israel. We want Israel to be better, we want it to be more fair, we want to end the occupation of ’67, but we don't want America to stop sending guns to Israel because we want our Israeli people to be safe. And I went over the line this year. I've gone over the line, and that's pushed me into another territory of being against. I now take the position that sadly very few people in Congress take, but 18 of them do. The Bernie Sanders people, even a couple of Jewish senators and a couple of Jewish Congress people take it, but the vast majority of our leaders, the vast majority of the Jewish people don't take this position. So it's pushed me.
So both of you are bringing so many very important aspects of this work that we do at the sisterhood. And what you're sharing is so important for our listeners to hear about being together, pushing. What I love the most, I'll tell you, that sort of being ready to be vulnerable, being ready to kind of gather that courage to step out of your own world, own bubble, own safety zone, and really be there to in solidarity with each other. I think that's incredible, and that really speaks a lot to what we are trying to do really with this organization. And just, Nancy, to your last point, the last statement that came out of the sisterhood includes that point that you were mentioning. And I just want to say that we have received a lot of very positive feedback from our membership about the statement that is asking, because what we are focusing on, I don't want to kind of go on for much longer, but what we are focusing on, that we are women of peace and for peace. And peace, it starts with absence of violence, right? It's a beginning, but it's necessary beginning of every peace in the society. So I wanted to just move a little bit to something that we will go back and forth, because you are sharing such wonderful examples of this work. But I just wanted to kind of step back a little bit, and since we are in this sort of interfaith realm of activism, of communication, if you can just share, both of you, a little bit, what has drawn you to interfaith work, and why do you believe in it, or do you believe in it, and have you seen any results over the years that give you hope?
Well, I guess I should start because I've been doing it longer than probably than some has been alive. Well, not quite, but well, I was drawn to it honestly when I was a teenager and a young person going to college and looking into things. I didn't know there were any Muslims. I never even heard of that. I was drawn to it because of the Christians. I love the Christians because they seem to be very comfortable talking about God, and I wanted to talk about God, and none of the Jews wanted to talk about God. They all wanted to talk about peoplehood and all that ethnicity and Israel and, all of that stuff, and basically culture. And the only people who want to talk about God who were Jewish were Orthodox, but I was a woman, so I couldn't hang out with them because they wouldn't accept me. So I became a liberal Jew who hung out with Christians and liked to talk about spiritual things. And then we discovered Muslims, honestly, that we discovered they existed at so sad, pathetic to think. I had a PhD in religion, and I had taken a whole course on Islam 101 was part of my doctoral work because I had to take be kind of exams at the beginning, and I had written down all these things about the five pillars and the this and the that, but I didn't know any Muslims. And I had no idea. And then September 11th happened, and I was this big interfaith lady, and all of a sudden people were saying, well, there's going to be a panel. And I thought, oh, good, I'll be the Jew, and there'll be a Catholic and a Protestant, just like always. I've been doing this for 20 years already. And they said, well, actually, the Christians have to combine and just send one person. They're going to have to decide between a Protestant and a Catholic because we're also going to have a Muslim. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know anything about that. So then I started this very steep learning curve to try to figure out who are Muslims. And lo and behold, I found out that I live in Germantown, which is a part of Philadelphia. And I kind of opened my eyes and I was looking down the street and like all these women walking around. It's like completely covered. And I had no idea why. And then I found out they were Muslims. They're Black women who are Muslims, and they're part of a pretty strong, very active mosque right near my house, not far. It's my neighborhood mosque. So I started going there, meeting the women. So that's what happened with me. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that when I first started hanging out, I was always with African Americans because that's where I live in Mount Airy, Philadelphia. But I was embarrassed to realize that they were my neighbors, and I didn't even know a single one. And I was Miss Interfaith. That was 23 years ago.
Well, that's when I came to this country 23 years ago.
See?
So, which is right before September 11.
Ah, that was my turning point.
And so there was a lot of, I came to Texas back then. I lived in Texas for 8 years and I've done some interfaith. But I actually wanted to say something you pointed out, Tahia, about peace before I answer the question about interfaith. And I think the strength that we as a group, the Sisters Waging Peace, have is that we kind of don't shy away from kind of not, I don't want to say confrontation, but to kind of like talk about things that matter, that we've discussed these points and missions that we have, and part of it we put just peace and not just peace. And that's because we kind of went back and forth in conversation of what it means peace for a Palestinian, at least peace for me when it comes from the West. It means that they just don't see any kind of physical violence, but occupation is violent, right? So people being under occupation on a daily basis is violent. And yet the West can describe this as peace. So that's not the peace that we'll be okay with and go back to, which is the status quo, right? That's why this Sisters Waging Peace, when we kind of talked about our mission, we kind of made sure that we put just peace, because peace came to mean something that's missing really important aspect to it. So that's why we added. Going back to the faith and interfaith, I grew up as a Muslim in Lebanon. I not religious, but spiritual, culturally Muslim. So coming to the United States at the time when it was like September 11, there was a lot of like being a Muslim was something that it for me it was like just being a human being, but it was very much highlighted and people
Yeah.
wanted to know, actually some people wanted to know. And I joined some interfaith, and I learned about my faith actually from others who are Muslims. And it was in the church, so it was mostly actually the interfaith I did in Texas, at least, was between the Presbyterian church and or Christians and Muslims. But then I also talked to some synagogues in Texas.
Mhm.
And
Good.
yeah. So currently, I think of it as I'm more spiritual too, like than religious. But what does that mean to me? For me, is that while I'm working, I can tell you why I'm working towards, and it's been difficult, but it's as you said, as we started, is like this whole life is an experiment, and I'm experimenting with being with the group, with the Sisters Waging Peace. I've discovered my superpower, and that is love. I've been very much loved as a child, and I that's grateful for, and it's privilege. And I decided that's my superpower. And what I'm going to do is that it's easy to love the people you love, and it's easy to love the people who are, like not hard, and it's easy to love people who are not bad, we call them, right? It's really hard to love people who are what we can consider evil. And I'm actually working with that. And what does that mean? Not accepting their behavior, but kind of sending love if it will shift some kind in the something in the universe. So I am actually, as a Palestinian, experimenting of sending love towards Netanyahu, which is really hard for me to do. But I am working on it and I'm experimenting with it. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes I resist it. But I feel like when I resist it, there is some kind of dehumanization that happens. So always, so then I'm like, no, why am I not? Don't want to love. And it's like, oh, but you don't want to love somebody who's evil. But I'm like, wait, the behavior is evil, yes. And the person might have, but I'm kind of working with that idea. I haven't gotten, like, I can't say I got it, but I'm working with it. And I'm really trying to kind of love, Netanyahu and Trump, and what does that mean? And
Mm,
it definitely, for me, it doesn't mean accepting their
mhm.
behavior. It doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean excusing them for giving some kind of excuse. Definitely doesn't mean that. But I feel like the only way we can fight evil is with love
Mm.
rather than with also something that's bad. So I'm deciding to kind of experiment my superpower and send it towards the universe, and specifically to those who are, I think, like Netanyahu and Trump, and yeah.
That's that's absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to share quickly. You reminded me of something that I heard once from a teacher, Muslim teacher, who said, often when people are angry and frustrated and disturbed with a particular person, sometimes they say, "Go to hell," right? And he said, instead of doing that, say, "May you be loved and blessed, and I'm praying for you." And that is that love that I see what you're saying. I see that story in your words, Sama, that it is us working on that sort of higher love that is going to make a change.
Yes. So rather than praying against that, like to go to hell, or to kind of, because of that anger, is praying for them to see the light, to see how, like to do the right thing and to do good towards people. Yeah.
Yes.
So for me,
Yeah.
I will say that one of the things, this is what I did my doctoral work on, was about the bifurcation of Judaism and Christianity. And Christianity is supposed to be about love, and Judaism is supposed to be about vengeance and maybe justice, but not love, and grace versus works and the whole thing. So that was what I was most interested in when I was younger. And so Judaism is never coded as the love religion. It's always Christianity is the love religion. But lately, this man named Shai Held wrote a book, Judaism is About Love. And it's a very radical book. He's a Bible scholar, and he goes and looks for all the different places in Judaism where we are talking about love and peace. Like, everybody's now reading this book. But the reason he had to write a book called Judaism is About Love is that we didn't think it was. You get it? So that's one thing.
That's great.
Me, what I try to do, because I have trouble with the love thing, what I try to do is see that of God in each person. And if I see Netanyahu, I don't actually.
If you think of God as love,
Yeah, well, that
then
works better if you think of
that's
right, right,
how
right. So
that's how I think of it. If
that's
God is
right. I
love,
think you're
then
saying the same
Netanyahu
thing,
in each one of us, which is scary, right?
but
Or Trump is in
inside
each one
him.
of us.
So there's two things I do. One is that I look inside and I say, if you want to use the word love, I'm loving that of God in him. It's not that it's all that. It's
Mhm.
it's that, yeah. But the other thing I think about is that when people provoke me, as you say, provoking peace, when I feel provoked, it's usually because it's something that I have trouble with inside myself.
Hmm.
That, there's something about that I'm hating, and the hating is because I'm seeing mirrored something that's really hard for me. And then I try, instead of hating them, to look at myself and see what it is I need to work on,
Yeah.
the arrogance maybe, or the uncaring, whatever it is. And so that's part of it. The thing about love, I don't want to go into all of it, it's words. I think it's words that we're talking about. I
Yes.
think we're really saying the same thing, which is to find the way in which our hearts open.
If you could convey something to the Jewish community, to the Israeli community, what would that be? What would you like to convey?
I would say that really, for me, I want them to know that the Palestinians are fighting against occupation. So if the occupation was Buddhist, was Christian, was any other religion, they would be fighting occupation still. So it's not the fight, although the narrative, they keep on telling it like it's Muslims against Jews, or Palestinian fighting the Jews, and it's anti-Semitism. It's really what they're fighting is that the occupation. So no, it doesn't matter what this occupation's faith is. People don't like to be occupied, like Nancy said. So they will be fighting occupation, even if the Jews converted to something else, or if it wasn't Jews. So that's what I really want to emphasize. It's the occupation, not the faith of those who are occupying.
Thank you so much. This was honestly, I have enough of love and energy, inspiration for the week to go through this week.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions you've always wanted to ask a Jew or a Muslim, but didn't know how or where to go? Ask us at podcast@sosspeace.org. We don't speak for everyone in our communities, but we're happy to give you answers from our own perspectives. And to learn more about the sisterhood, subscribe to the newsletter on our website, sosspeace.org.
If this conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you think, we'd love for you to share it, leave a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The opinions of speakers and hosts do not always reflect official positions of the sisterhood. All rights to video and audio content belong to the sisterhood. Until next time, keep listening,
Keep learning,
and keep provoking peace.